Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When builder Chris Westbrook bought a quiet forest lot to craft his dream home, he expected peace, not war. But one ruthless HOA queen wasn't ready to let go of control, and what began as a simple build turned into a brutal battle of sabotage, fake laws, and ultimate justice. When I first laid eyes on the 10-acre lot just outside High Meadow Pines, I knew it was exactly what I'd been looking for. Quiet, forested, sloped just right for drainage, and best of all, no HOA jurisdiction. I double-checked before I bought it, of course. I've been in construction too long not to know that HOAs are allergic to sawdust and freedom. I was a licensed contractor from Idaho with my own furniture-making business, and I wanted to build a modern live work loft with a full woodworking shop right next to it. Nothing huge, nothing flashy. Just clean lines, a good roof, and space to breathe. The land had sat vacant for decades. The access road was gravel, winding through a few hills before reaching a natural clearing. I brought in a mobile trailer for storage and permits, parked a generator, and set up portable fencing around the area I'd marked for foundation prep. The first load of timber arrived 2 days later, followed by insulation, windows, and the steel frame for the roof beam. I was just starting to unload joist hangers when I noticed a woman standing a little too confidently at the edge of my gravel lot. She wore bright white sneakers, a fleece vest zipped to her neck, and a name badge clipped to her windbreaker. I knew the type before she even opened her mouth. Middle-aged, posture like she's trying to hold in a fart, and superiority at the same time. The badge read HOA Compliance Monitor, High Meadow Pines. She didn't wave, didn't introduce herself, just marched up with a clipboard and a tight little smile like I was a teenager caught smoking behind the gym. "Excuse me," she said, looking me up and down like I was a wild raccoon, "but your construction project is disrupting the visual harmony of our community." I blinked, slowly pulled off my work gloves, and replied, "I'm sorry. Who exactly are you?" "Again, I'm Karen Gillespie," she said, lifting her chin. "I represent the High Meadow Pines Homeowners Association. This lot falls within our visual corridor." "Visual corridor," I echoed, trying not to laugh. "Okay. Well, I'm Chris Westbrook. This land doesn't fall under your HOA jurisdiction. I made sure of that before I bought it." She tapped her clipboard. "That may be your belief, but your activity affects the neighborhood's visual character. This building has not been approved by our design committee because," I said calmly, "I'm not required to submit anything to your design committee. I pulled county permits, got zoning clearance, and submitted my septic plan. I'm not in High Meadow Pines." She clicked her tongue like I was a stubborn child. "This structure violates community aesthetics. We have an obligation to maintain standards." I gestured around. "Lady, this is a wooded slope. I've seen 6-foot-tall inflatable Santas on your side of the ridge. You want to talk about violations of aesthetic standards?" Her lips tightened. "We'll be submitting a formal complaint. Expect a cease and desist notice." "Sure," I said, waving her off. "You do that." She turned and stormed off like she expected me to beg her for forgiveness. I watched her disappear over the ridge and muttered, "Jesus Christ, here we go." That night, I set up 2 motion-activated cameras, one facing the gravel entrance, one aimed at the lumber stack near the build site. Not because I thought anything would happen yet, but because I've dealt with people like her before. HOA zealots love paperwork, but they love sabotage even more. Sure enough, the next morning I found a fresh chalk X scrawled on both posts of my driveway entrance. Big, white, and deliberate. I checked the camera footage. Blurry figure in a hoodie, likely female, about Karen's height. Middle of the night, fast, no vehicle, cute. By noon, I had cleaned the markings off and replaced my portable fencing with welded steel gate poles I had in storage. Not permanent, just something that sent a message. This isn't your sandbox. By day 3, I was back to framing, minding my business, listening to classic rock while fitting the ledger board when a black SUV idled up the drive. No badge this time, just tinted windows and a familiar smirk. Karen again. She didn't get out, just rolled down her window and said, "You'll be hearing from the county." I wiped the sweat off my face. "Then I'll be happy to offer them coffee when they show up." "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. I leaned against a sawhorse. "On who?" She didn't answer, just rolled up her window and drove away. I watched her tail lights disappear, already feeling that familiar thrum in my ribs, the one that always kicks in right before a legal battle starts. I'd seen it a dozen times back in Idaho. HOA types with too much power, too little land, and an unholy fear of modern-looking buildings. This time, though, I wasn't the hired contractor. I was the owner, and I wasn't backing down. 3 days passed in relative quiet, which in hindsight should have set off alarm bells. I kept my head down, worked 12-hour days, and made solid progress on the foundation and main frame. The walls were up to waist height, the subfloor was set, and my lumber was tarped and organized better than most contractor supply yards. I figured maybe Karen had done her little HOA tap dance and moved on. Wishful thinking. Late morning on a Thursday, as I was fitting in anchor bolts, a white Ford Escape rolled up the gravel with a county seal on the door. The man who stepped out was tall, mid-50s, wearing a reflective vest with a clipboard in hand. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Morning," he said, offering a tight smile. "Chris Westbrook?" "That's me," I replied, wiping sawdust from my shirt. "Jim Norris, County Planning and Zoning. Mind if we talk?" "Not at all," I said, already heading toward the trailer where I kept my permit folder. "Let me guess, someone filed a complaint." He chuckled under his breath. "That obvious, huh?" "Only if you've ever dealt with HOAs before," I said, handing him the full packet. "Here's the permit for new construction, septic approval, and site grading. You'll see the stamp from the county engineer on page 3. He nodded, flipping through with practiced efficiency. "You're outside any HOA boundary, correct?" I pointed to the map pinned inside my trailer. "This ridge is the natural border. Everything east is high meadow pines. I'm west by about 100 feet. County land." "Right," he muttered, still reading. "The complaint alleges unauthorized commercial construction, says you're building a business, not a residence. Claims there's excessive noise, truck traffic, and possible damage to wildlife habitat." I laughed. "It's a workshop and a small loft. For me, I work from home. I've got maybe one delivery every few days, and half the time it's just me cutting wood and listening to Leonard Skynerd." He raised an eyebrow. "The wildlife angle is new. They said you might be disrupting nesting areas for protected bird species." "Is that so?" I asked. "Funny, they weren't concerned when they installed tennis courts and poured concrete for the community pavilion last year." That was all within spitting distance of the same pine groves. He gave a dry smile. "Look, between you and me, I've seen this kind of thing before. People get territorial, HOA types especially. From what I can tell, your documentation is in order." "Appreciate you being straight with me," I said. He paused. "But I do have to log the visit. And, off the record, be prepared. They might escalate this. Sometimes they take their grievances to the state level." I shrugged. "Let them. I've got nothing to hide." He nodded, tucked the folder under his arm, and walked back to his SUV. Just before driving off, he rolled down the window and added, "One more thing. They mentioned they might get environmental services involved. If that happens, make sure your erosion control is visible, even if it's not required. Just saves you a headache. Copy that," I said. The second he was gone, I walked back to the trailer and mounted a bright orange erosion control sign next to my silt fencing like it was the American flag. If they wanted to play games, I'd be 5 moves ahead. That night, I got mail. Someone had dropped a glossy printed flyer in my mailbox. No postage, just a stack of copies tucked between the bills. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Unregulated construction threatens our neighborhood. Is this the kind of community we want?" Below it was a grainy, zoomed-in photo of my trailer, framed to look like a meth lab or a junkyard. It had quotes from anonymous residents. "It's ruining the view. What if there are chemicals? We moved here for peace, not plywood." I wasn't even surprised anymore. The back of the flyer had contact info for the High Meadow Pines Aesthetic Protection Committee. At the bottom was a blurry watermark, printed in cooperation with the High Meadow Pines HOA. Real subtle. I tossed the flyers in a bin and sat down to review the footage from my cameras. Around 2 in the morning, someone had walked up the drive in a hoodie, dropped the flyers in the mailbox, and scurried back toward the neighborhood fence line. No car. Just shadows and paranoia. The next morning, I was back to framing, except now I had my drone hovering overhead, filming the property from above while I worked. Not because I expected an ambush, but because I wanted evidence. Real, time-stamped, GPS-tagged footage. In this kind of war, receipts were worth more than tools. Around 10, my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I let it ring out. 5 minutes later, a voicemail came through. Karen's voice. "You've been warned, Mr. Westbrook. The community is organizing. You can still do the right thing and stop this before it becomes unpleasant." I played the message twice, then saved it in 3 separate folders, one on the phone, one in the cloud, one on a flash drive labeled bunker mode. They thought they were going to bully me into leaving. They didn't know they'd picked a contractor who'd survived 8 years of HOA bids, 5 small claims lawsuits, and 1 arson attempt by a disgruntled client's boyfriend. Unpleasant? Lady, you have no idea. By the end of the week, I had all 4 walls framed and the roofing trusses scheduled for delivery. I wasn't moving fast, just steady. 1 man, 1 lot, 1 vision. The place was starting to look like something, and maybe that was the problem. Because Saturday morning, I got my first taste of real escalation. It started with the sound of gravel under tires, multiple tires. I looked up from the miter saw to see 3 men in neon orange safety vests guiding a flatbed truck down my access road. It was hauling 2 massive precast concrete barricades. Not construction material. These were the kind they used to block highways during floods or protests. The driver barely made eye contact as he slowly rolled toward the entrance of my property. I dropped my saw, dusted my hands, and walked toward them. One of the men, a guy built like a refrigerator with a mullet and aviators, held up his hand. "Whoa there, sir. Roads being closed off temporarily." "Says who?" I asked flatly. "HMPHOA," he replied, as if that answered anything. "Let me help you out here," I said, pulling out my phone and starting to record. "This road is public, maintained by the county. It is not under the jurisdiction of your little uniform cult." He didn't flinch. "We've been hired to place these blocks under the direction of the HOA board. You'll need to reroute access for now." "Reroute access to what? My front gate is right there. My trailer, my foundation." "That's my house you're trying to wall off like it's East Berlin." He shrugged. "Take it up with the HOA, buddy. We just follow work orders." A familiar voice interrupted. "I suggest you remain calm, Mr. Westbrook." Karen. She stepped out from behind the flatbed truck, once again dressed like she was headed to a golf club tribunal. This time she had a clipboard and a walkie-talkie, which she spoke into as if she were coordinating a NASA launch. "Emergency Access Protocol, subsection 9.7, she said smugly. "Due to ongoing concerns about noise, truck traffic, and unauthorized materials, we're implementing a temporary closure of this corridor." I stared at her for a moment, then turned to the workers. "I'm giving you a lawful warning. If you place those barricades, you will be obstructing a public roadway and interfering with access to private property, which, in case you missed the signs, does not belong to your HOA. Do you have a permit for driveway access?" Karen asked, like a cartoon villain with a zoning fetish. "Yes," I said, "filed with the county. And the sheriff's office is going to love this conversation." She scoffed. "You think the sheriff is going to care about a temporary closure?" I didn't answer. I was already dialing. To their credit, the Park County Sheriff's Office sent a unit in under 20 minutes. A white SUV with county insignia pulled up, and out stepped a deputy named Lopez, mid-30s, calm demeanor, hand resting casually near his holster. Karen marched up first, papers flapping. "Officer, thank goodness. We've had ongoing issues with this individual disrupting the community and—" Lopez held up a hand. "Ma'am, I need to speak with the property owner first." I raised mine. "Right here." He took me aside, asked for my ID, and got the rundown. I handed him copies of the property deed, driveway permit, zoning clearance, and a map showing the lot's boundaries in relation to High Meadow Pines. He read every page carefully. Then he turned to Karen and said, "Ma'am, this lot is outside your HOA jurisdiction." "That's debatable," she snapped. "No," he replied, "it's not. I have the county overlay right here. Your jurisdiction ends 40 yards east of his property line. And this road? Maintained by the county. You don't have the authority to block access. Period. But the community has concerns." "And that's fine," he interrupted. "You're welcome to voice them through legal channels. But right now, you're obstructing a public right-of-way and trespassing on land you don't control." She fumed. "You can't seriously expect us to allow—" Lopez raised a finger. "If you or your hired contractors drop those barriers, I will charge all involved parties with obstruction and criminal mischief." Clear. Karen looked like someone had just peed in her organic kale smoothie. Lopez turned to the men in vests. "Unload those blocks at the end of the road and leave them there." "Don't touch this driveway again," one of the workers muttered. "Wasn't worth it anyway," and climbed back into the cab. As the flatbed rumbled away and the barricades sat unused by the tree line, Karen glared at me like she was trying to melt my face off with laser vision. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yeah," I said. "That's what every Bond villain says before they get arrested." She spun on her heel and stormed off, muttering into her walkie-talkie like she was launching a counteroffensive. Deputy Lopez stayed for a few extra minutes just in case. Before leaving, he looked at me and said, "Keep your cameras rolling. People like this, they don't go away easy." I nodded. "Don't worry. The place is lit up like Fort Knox." He smiled slightly, tipped his hat, and drove off. That night, I added 2 more floodlights and an infrared trail cam. And before I went to bed, I printed a new sign for the front gate. "Private property, not subject to HOA rules. Trespassers will be documented and prosecuted." By now, I thought I'd seen the worst of it. Flyers, fake complaints, road blockades, classic HOA power games. But the thing about bullies is they only escalate when you don't flinch. And I don't flinch. So when I walked out of my trailer just after sunrise and saw a rusted metal barrel sitting dead center in my gravel driveway, I didn't panic. At first, I just stared at it. Dent on one side, faded red paint, stenciled across the front in white block letters. "Flammable. Handle with caution." I'd seen enough of those in my contracting days to know that either someone had dragged this thing out of a scrapyard or it was meant to be a prop in a low-budget sabotage attempt. Either way, it sure as hell hadn't been there the night before. I didn't touch it, just circled around, scanned the area, and walked back to check the security feed from the night. Sure enough, at around 2:28 in the morning, a hooded figure entered from the ridge behind my property line, walking in from the high meadow pine side. The camera on the south fence caught them pushing the barrel across the gravel like they were delivering cursed treasure. No gloves, no attempt to hide their face once they got close. It was one of Karen's lackeys. Tall, narrow build, scruffy beard. I remembered him from the barricade fiasco. Guy had been wearing the same boots. I saved the footage and started my day as usual. Coffee, checklist, lumber inventory. I figured I'd file a report after I got through the morning's framing. But fate, as always, had a more theatrical sense of timing. Exactly 45 minutes later, a white SUV with the High Meadow Pines logo painted on the side rolled up, followed by a red fire marshal vehicle. Out stepped a woman in a fire-resistant jacket, clipboard in hand, and the same HOA safety patrol officer I'd seen before, some retired mall cop with a tactical flashlight and a permanent squint. The fire marshal walked up briskly. "We received an anonymous tip about hazardous materials on site." "Oh, you don't say," I replied, gesturing toward the barrel. "Funny how it was delivered just a few hours before your arrival." She glanced at the barrel, pulled out her phone, and took photos. "Do you know what this is?" "No," I said. "It's not mine. It was dumped here in the middle of the night." "That's a pretty serious accusation." "Not an accusation," I said, pulling out my tablet and opening the security feed. "Just facts." I played the footage for her. She watched in silence, brows rising incrementally. When the hooded man shoved the barrel into the middle of the driveway, the HOA officer stepped closer, clearly trying to catch a glimpse. "You recognize him?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just cleared his throat and took a sudden interest in the tree line. The fire marshal nodded slowly. "Can you send me this video?" "Already backed up 3 times," I said. "You'll get a copy in 10 minutes. And, just so we're clear, this is the 3rd time someone from that neighborhood has trespassed or interfered with my construction. The first time was flyers. The second was a road blockade. This is a crime." The fire marshal stepped back, radioed her office, and within 10 minutes, 2 sheriff deputies arrived. Not Lopez this time, but a younger pair. One of them took my statement, watched the video, and flagged it as part of an open investigation. The other took photos of the barrel, called in a hazmat unit just to be safe, and had the item tagged and removed. Karen, naturally, showed up 15 minutes later. She pulled up in her white BMW and climbed out with her usual expression, like she'd just smelled something expensive but rotten. "What's going on here?" she asked the fire marshal, her voice faux concerned. "We received a report about dangerous materials on this lot." The marshal turned to her. "Ma'am, are you the one who made the report?" Karen blinked. "Well, I'm part of the Neighborhood Safety Liaison Committee. Residents reported concerns." The marshal didn't look impressed. You understand filing a false hazardous materials complaint is a criminal offense? Karen's mouth opened, then closed. We were simply looking out for our community. The deputy showed her the footage. She went pale. I don't know who that is, she said too quickly. Then I'm sure you'll have no problem cooperating with the investigation, the deputy said. Karen's eyes darted between the barrel, the officers, and the growing number of witnesses. Neighbors had started peeking over the HOA fence line, phones in hand. This man is provoking us, she snapped, pointing at me. He's disrupting our peace. By building on my own land with legal permits? I said. Yeah, I can see how that would offend your personal utopia. The deputy stepped between us. That's enough. Karen stormed back to her car, tires spitting gravel as she peeled out. The sheriff's office towed the barrel off-site, and I spent the rest of the afternoon giving a full deposition to the investigator. They were already compiling a case file with everything from the fake flyers to the road obstruction. Now they had video evidence of sabotage. I added a third camera that evening, aimed at the ridge where the intruder had entered. Then I set up a motion-activated strobe and alarm, not loud enough to wake the dead, but just enough to ruin a trespasser's night. By sunset, the site was quiet again, but I didn't feel calm. This wasn't a game anymore. This was baiting. Setting me up, trying to make me look like the dangerous one. They wanted a fire? I'd give them something else entirely. I was halfway through setting up scaffolding the next morning when I saw the sheriff's cruiser again, crawling up the gravel like a slow-moving storm cloud. My gut tightened for a moment, but when Deputy Lopez stepped out, I relaxed a little. He was the only official around here who seemed to treat the law like something real, not just a decorative badge. He gave me a nod, but he didn't smile. "Morning, Chris," he said, resting his hand on his belt. "We had a 911 call this morning. You were named as the primary subject. I set down my hammer." "Let me guess." "Karen?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a folded piece of paper from his vest and handed it to me. It was a photocopy of a court order, or at least that's what it was pretending to be. Order of immediate cessation of construction, complete with a poorly photoshopped county seal and a signature that looked like it came from a kindergarten art class. The kicker? The case number was formatted wrong, and the listed judge had retired 5 years ago. I'd done enough contract work to know a fake when I saw one. "You're kidding me," I muttered. "Unfortunately not." She flagged down a patrol at the highway turnoff, claimed you were in direct violation of this document, and insisted we intervene immediately. I looked up. "And did you?" He raised a brow. I took the paper, called the clerk's office, and asked if they had any record of a cease order or legal action involving your parcel. They laughed. "So why are you here?" "Because she insisted on filing a formal complaint, and protocol means I have to investigate. And because I figured you'd want to know this was escalating." I handed the paper back. "I've got camera footage again." She was just outside my gate around 5 this morning, pacing with a folder in hand. "I'd like a copy of that." "You'll have it within the hour." We stood in silence for a moment, the wind picking up dust across the lot. I could feel it again, that tension, like I was standing on a frozen lake and someone was dancing on the other side with a hammer. Also, Lopez added, "She's pushing this narrative that you're operating illegally. Claims you're converting the lot into a commercial warehouse, bringing in chemicals, disturbing protected wildlife, standard kitchen sink sabotage." I sighed. "I've got wildlife clearance, zoning approval, contractor license, and a clean environmental inspection." "She's grasping at ghosts." He nodded. "Still, you may want to talk to an attorney." Just to be ready, I had one on speed dial already. Later that afternoon, Karen returned, but this time she didn't come alone. She arrived with a freelance news crew, one of those low-tier community watchdog vloggers desperate for outrage clicks. Her hair was perfectly styled, blazer immaculate, and she was holding that fake court order like it was the Magna Carta. They walked up to my gate, camera rolling. "I'm Karen Gillespie, High Meadow Pines HOA compliance officer," she declared loudly, speaking past the locked gate toward my trailer. "This construction site is in direct violation of a county-issued cease order. You are hereby instructed to leave the premises immediately and cease all activity." I stepped out holding my own camera. "This land is mine. I have the deed. I have the permits. And you're brandishing a forged court document on video." She froze for half a second, then pressed on. "This will be on the evening update. The community needs to see who's disturbing the peace." I smiled, calm and cold. "Please do. I'll upload the footage from last night too, the one where you drop off this order and practice your little speech in front of your mirror." The cameraman faltered. Wait, what? Karen spun on him. Keep filming. I'd advise you not to trespass further, I said. This gate stays locked. And I'm calling my attorney. They left in a flurry of staged outrage and poorly framed drone shots. Within hours, the video was up online. Local HOA confronts rogue builder, but the comments didn't go as Karen expected. Apparently, a lot of people were tired of HOAs trying to play God. My inbox filled up with messages from other landowners, some of them even offering support or sharing similar war stories. But more importantly, I got a call that night from the county prosecutor's office. A clerk had stumbled across the court order in a community Facebook group. They were not amused. Mr. Westbrook, the woman on the line said, "We take falsification of court documents very seriously. May we set up a time to collect your security footage?" I told her I'd leave a flash drive in a secure Dropbox at the sheriff's office by morning. This was no longer just personal, it was criminal. And the walls were starting to close in. Not on me, but on Karen. By the time I dropped off the flash drive at the sheriff's office, I was running on 3 hours of sleep and spite. I hadn't planned to become the center of a neighborhood war, but here I was, dodging flying accusations like nails from a pneumatic gun. Karen's antics had crossed the line from nuisance to felony, and part of me hoped, no, knew, that something bigger was going to unravel. People that smug don't stop at one fake document. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Carla Rankin, soft-spoken, careful, but tense. She lived 2 streets inside High Meadow Pines and said she'd seen the video. She asked if we could meet in person somewhere away from HOA eyes. We settled on a gas station near the edge of town, and I met her in the back corner of the parking lot next to the propane tanks. She pulled up in an old Lexus SUV, wore big sunglasses, and didn't get out of the car. I leaned into the window, and she got right to it. "She's been doing this for years," Carla said. "She sends fake violation notices to people she doesn't like. We're told not to ask questions. My husband's a contractor. He tried bidding on a pergola project for a neighbor. Karen told him his design violated the community's heritage aesthetic." Whatever that means. "She ever mention infrastructure fees?" I asked. Carla paused, nodded slowly. "Yeah. When we moved in, we were told there was a $2,500 infrastructure maintenance bond that wasn't listed in the closing papers. We paid it. Everyone does. But the HOA doesn't even own the roads. The county does, bingo." I thanked her, handed her a burner email in case she wanted to send anything anonymously, and drove straight to the county clerk's office. Over the next 2 days, I dug through publicly accessible HOA filings, permit records, land ownership maps, anything with a signature. It wasn't glamorous work, lots of dust, old file folders, and eye strain, but the pictures started forming fast. The HOA had been issuing community directives on fake letterhead for years. None of the HOA's paperwork was notarized. Some even had identical signature stamps on different documents, dated years apart. It got worse. Karen had been collecting permit processing fees from new residents, money that never went through county offices. She issued her own HOA compliance permits, using language that mimicked official building approvals. It was a parallel shadow government run out of her guest room printer. But the real nail came when I found a complaint filed by a former homeowner dated 3 years ago. He'd tried to sell his house, but Karen sent letters to the buyer's agent claiming undisclosed liens. The sale fell through. The man eventually sold at a loss, then moved out of state, and according to his last letter, considered suing but gave up out of exhaustion. I scanned everything. Every stamped page, every mismatched seal, every note signed HOA board director without listing a board. I packaged it, labeled it, and sent it all to the same prosecutor's clerk who called me days earlier. I thought maybe that would buy me some breathing room. I was wrong. That night, someone slashed the tires on my truck, all 4 of them. No note, no signature, but the message was clear. Shut up, or things escalate. I called the sheriff's office, filed the report, uploaded the footage from my security cams again. Sadly, the person stayed just out of range. But I could tell from the movement it wasn't some random vandal. It was someone who knew the layout. Probably one of the same guys who helped Karen place the concrete blocks earlier. I wasn't scared. I've had tools thrown at me by drunk roofers, but I was pissed. And now I was thinking not just about court or cops, but leverage. So I made a call. A buddy of mine back in Idaho, Doug, was a former federal fraud investigator turned legal consultant. I didn't need a lawyer who only spoke courtroom. I needed one who spoke scam. Doug agreed to come out for a week. And while I waited for him, I did the most threatening thing a man in my position could do. I kept building. The noise of saws, hammers, and progress echoed through the trees like a war drum, and I made sure every bit of it was recorded. Doug showed up 2 days later in a dusty white Jeep with Idaho plates, a go bag full of legal books, and a look on his face like he'd just walked into the world's pettiest war, and was thrilled. I'd known him since we were both starting out on framing crews in our 20s, and if there was anyone who understood both dirt under the nails reality and bureaucratic blood sport, it was him. He walked my property perimeter first, squinting at the gate, at the tree line, at the still smeared concrete from where the blocks used to be. Then he said, "This is either a minor cult or a major civil lawsuit." Possibly both. I gave him the full rundown. Fake documents, slashed tires, boulder-blocked road, false permits, the forged court order, the hidden fees, and handed over the flash drive with every clip, scan, photo, and file I had. Doug spent that entire night in my trailer going through it, laptop glowing in the dark while I worked outside under floodlights to finish framing the south wall. He didn't say much until morning. When he finally emerged, coffee in hand and eyes red from no sleep, he said one sentence: "She's going down." He contacted the county prosecutor directly, this time offering to act as a legal consultant for witness coordination and document analysis. They agreed, and that was when the real machine kicked into motion. First came the grand jury subpoena for HOA internal documents. Karen tried to claim they were private community property, but the court disagreed, especially since the HOA was improperly incorporated and had been operating under outdated, unsigned bylaws. Then came the search warrant, issued after Doug submitted a side-by-side comparison of genuine county permits and Karen's fraudulent versions. Deputies raided her home on a Tuesday morning while most residents were at work. They found more than just fake papers, stacks of unregistered money orders, HOA violation letters dating back 8 years, and, most damning of all, a USB stick full of recorded voice memos where Karen laid out her playbook. In one file, she laughed as she described charging a neighbor extra because she didn't like their fence color. In another, she admitted to faking signatures on compliance notices by tracing them off the original title transfer forms. The audio quality was clear, her voice unmistakable. They arrested her that same afternoon. Multiple counts of fraud, impersonation of a government official, falsifying public documents, criminal harassment, and obstruction of justice. News traveled fast. By that evening, I had neighbors I'd never met before driving down the gravel path to thank me, to apologize, or to ask if I had any idea what would happen to the HOA now. Some were angry. They felt deceived. Others were embarrassed, realizing they'd blindly paid into a fake system, but most just looked relieved. The next day, I was contacted by a reporter from a regional paper. They'd seen the viral footage of the fake court order standoff and the arrest, and wanted to do a full piece. I agreed. On one condition: they didn't just tell the story of Karen, but also of the larger issue, that people outside HOA boundaries weren't subject to their rules, and that too many communities were being manipulated by people playing authority without ever having earned it. The article ran 2 days later. Headline: Builder exposes rogue HOA president, fake court orders, shady fees, and a $650,000 reckoning. The county followed up by freezing the HOA's accounts pending a full audit. Several residents launched a civil suit against the board, or what was left of it, claiming financial damages, fraudulent fees, and unlawful pressure tactics. And I filed my own civil claim for property damage, business interruption, and emotional distress. Doug helped me prepare everything. He even represented me pro bono, just for the satisfaction of burning Karen's empire to ash in front of a judge. 3 weeks later, the ruling came down. I was awarded $650,000. Karen, denied bail, remained in custody awaiting trial. The HOA's corporate status was revoked for failure to comply with nonprofit governance laws. The county announced a formal review of HOA oversight procedures. I didn't cheer. I just got back to work. The roof wasn't going to finish itself. The day I got the compensation check, I didn't throw a party. I didn't go out to celebrate or post some snarky victory speech online. I walked into the nearest hardware store, bought a new generator, 2 fresh saw blades, and a 20-foot steel pole. I spent the rest of the day welding a custom sign. By sunset, it stood proud at the entrance to my driveway. No HOA zone. This property operates under the United States Constitution. I figured that was direct enough. Karen's trial was still months away, but the fallout hit like a flash flood. The remaining HOA board members tried to hold emergency meetings to restructure, but it was pointless. Their authority had been hollow from the start. Without Karen's threats and her fake documents, the entire framework collapsed like termite-eaten lumber. A group of homeowners filed to formally dissolve the HOA, citing breach of trust, financial misconduct, and fraudulent representation. Others filed personal lawsuits, claiming they'd been coerced into paying illegal fees or had lost buyers due to Karen's interference. The High Meadow Pines name was officially delisted from the county HOA registry. Its bank account was frozen pending court resolution, and for the first time in over a decade, the neighborhood was no longer under HOA governance. Some people cried, some popped champagne, some just quietly took down their surveillance signs. Meanwhile, I finished my build. The loft came out exactly as I'd envisioned it, sleek, efficient, with exposed cedar beams and floor-to-ceiling windows facing the valley. My workshop was fully outfitted with everything I needed to start custom furniture production. Orders started trickling in, locally at first, then through social media. Turned out the guy who beat the fake HOA queen was a good story to share, and good marketing, but I didn't stop there. Doug and I launched a little side project, Land Right, a consulting initiative for landowners dealing with overreach from HOAs they never agreed to join. We weren't lawyers, but we had contacts, templates, and playbooks. We started giving talks, at county fairs, at rural co-ops, even a few law school seminars. People showed up in droves. Turns out, there were a lot of people like me, people who just wanted to live in peace, on their own land, without being told that their porch lights were the wrong shade of white, or that their kids' toys were unsightly. I became a kind of reluctant symbol for private land rights. I didn't ask for it, but I leaned into it. Because if there's one thing I learned from this whole fiasco, it's this. Fake authority only works when people don't push back. Karen tried to bury me in red tape, concrete blocks, and forged signatures. She used fear and appearance to hold power she never earned. But once you tear down the illusion, there's not much left. Just a woman yelling about harmony while committing crimes in a floral cardigan. I visit town sometimes now, and people recognize me. One old guy gave me a free slice of pie at the diner just for knocking her off her throne. I kept the receipt, tax purposes, but mostly I just enjoy the quiet, the real kind. Not the enforced HOA certified version, just the sound of wind through pine trees and the whir of a table saw cutting into freshly planed wood. And every now and then, someone drives by slow. A new neighbor maybe, curious. They see the sign. They take a long look, and they keep moving, just the way I like it.